Zigzag and One, a place where we honestly discuss how to navigate the zigs and zags in our crazy lives. Expect heartwarming stories, some laughter, and maybe a few tears as we embrace life's challenges and choose joy over a momentary defeat. Today, we will hear from someone whose life has had some unexpected turns, but chose to keep moving forward. What did they learn? Some valuable life lessons. Zigs and zags are also a part of our host, Melanie Brown's journey. She too had to find the determination to never give up. What are we waiting for? Let's dive in.
Welcome to the Zigzag and One podcast. I'm your host, Melanie Brown. Today's episode is the 50th episode of the Zigzag and One podcast. I'm excited to have shared 50 episodes so far, but today's episode is kinda extra special. You'll see why in just a moment. 20 years ago today, our country experienced the full force of terrorism. 2,977 precious lives were taken that day because of sinister plots by evil men. Over the last 19 years, the names of those who perished have been read aloud as a meaningful way for us to never forget. Those names will be read aloud again today on this 20th anniversary of 9/11. But thousands of others were in or near the Twin Towers in New York City on 9/11. Those people escaped death that horrific day, but many have been plagued with physical, mental, and emotional injuries. Those are the survivors of 9/11. I'm honored today to spend time with one of those survivors. Her name is Cruz. Michelle was at her office on the 95th floor of 2 World Trade Center the morning of September 11th, 2001. She'll be sharing the events of that morning, including her narrow escape before 2 Trade Tower was hit by the second plane. And my favorite part of her interview is her encounter with a cab driver, because that part of her story validates that God was with her that day. 10 years after 9/11, Michelle and her then husband Randy published a book titled Pursuing Your Destiny: How to Overcome Adversity and Achieve Your Dreams. I read her book. It's a hard read because Michelle describes the events of that day, but she also shares a positive mindset and resilience and determination to live fully. That shines through, making her book a powerful read. In addition to being an author and speaker, Michelle is a yoga teacher and a branding consultant. As you've probably already noticed, today's episode will be longer than usual because I believe we will learn so much by hearing Michelle's firsthand account of all she faced on that tragic day. Hearing about her life since then will encourage and inspire you, as she believes that day led to her purpose in life. Please join me for my interview with 9/11 survivor Michelle Cruz. Thank you so much for joining me today, Michelle. It is an honor.
Thank you so much. It's such an honor for me to actually spend this time with you.
Well, in preparing for your interview, of course, I watched the interviews that you've already done over the years, the snippets of the motivational talks that you have given to students. Those are my favorite because I'm a teacher.
Oh, are you?
Yeah, so I love that you have done that. When I read your book, in addition to watching all the interviews and the snippets of the motivational talks, I get this sense of a strong woman. I am excited about sharing what I already know about you. So let's get started. If we could, I'd like for us to start the morning of 9/11. You got to work early, and if you could talk about the time that you got there and why, and then just start talking through the events of that day.
As you know, there are thousands of different stories as to why people who worked in the World Trade Center did not show up that day. Maybe they were sick, maybe they were running late. For me, I was working on a project for one of the portfolio managers, actually 2 portfolio managers, and they asked me to come in 45 minutes earlier than what I would normally come in, which was at 9:15. So I was up until 1 o'clock in the morning working on this project. I arrived at exactly 8:30. I came in with some guys from IT. We're all in the elevator, and I just vividly remember one of them saying, "Does somebody smell like the beach in here?" And I remember putting on this Bath and Body Works kind of like mist, and I was like, "Yeah, it just reminds me that I really should be at the beach. I really should be taking a day off because the morning was so beautiful. The sky was clear." And I was like, "No, I'm here. I'm here. I just got to do what I got to do." So I got out of the elevator, told the guys, have a great day. And the first thing I smelled was coffee brewing on the other side of the floor. I said, okay, I got this. This presentation is done. Everything's going to be great. And then I got to my desk. I barely had the chance to put my briefcase down when I got a call. And when I picked up the phone, it was my ex-boyfriend that I had broken up with. And he said, "Hey, how you doing?" And I said, "I'm so busy. I just have to get to work. I have a big day ahead of me. I have to go to work." And I hung up the phone on him. And then all of a sudden I heard the roar. It sounded like the roar of an airplane engine. And I was on a 95th floor. And not once did I ever hear the roar of an airplane engine. It just seemed like it was coming closer and closer. And all of a sudden I heard what sounded like a bomb. And then one of my coworkers from the other side of the floor said, "Something just hit the World Trade Center or Tower One." He said, "Something just hit Tower One." And it took a moment, but then all of the windows on my floor started to break, started to shatter. And the way the World Trade Center was designed was that the walls were actually made of glass.
Mm.
So all of a sudden, the glass started breaking and started feeling like there was heat. I grabbed my briefcase, grabbed my purse, I ran towards the stairs. And that's when my coworker, Lori, out of nowhere, just grabbed my arm and pulled me back. And she said, "No, we're taking the elevator." And I said, "In an emergency, we can't. This is an emergency." And she said, "No, you're coming in the elevator." She and I were in the elevator. We stopped at the 90th floor where a coworker, Dave, and actually Andrew from our floor was also in the elevator. So all four of us were in this elevator, but we were holding the door open just in case anybody else would come in. That floor, the 90th floor, was housed by the legal department and HR. And all I heard were people just screaming through the phone, calling out their loved ones. What's going on? I have no idea what happened, but nobody came into that elevator. So we let the elevator close, and then it landed onto the main elevator bank, which was the 78th floor of Tower 2. And that was complete chaos. People were pushing and shoving, trying to get into every single elevator that was open. My coworker Lori and I were just shoved and shoved until someone said, "No more people, no more people." When those doors closed, I felt like it was a collaborative feeling of, okay, are we dead? Are we alive? Are we numb? Are we able to understand what's going on here? As soon as we got into the lobby, all of us just flooded out. I saw one of my coworkers going into the elevator, and I pulled her out of the elevator and I said, "Something just happened at Tower One. You can't go. You can't go." And all of a sudden, we heard Port Authority making an announcement that there's nothing wrong with Tower Two. Go to work, go into the building.
I remember reading that in your book, and chills just went through my body, thinking if people had listened to that and gone in and gone back to work, the number of additional people that would have been lost.
Wait, that's actually exactly what happened. I saw people going into the elevator that I never saw again.
Oh,
And that's why when I timed it and I kind of remember how many elevators were coming down, when I walked out into the lobby, I felt like I was actually in one of the last elevators, because as soon as I looked up, as soon as I got out of the lobby onto the street, is when the second plane hit Tower 2. But at the time, my friend Pete, who was calling from Chicago, he said, "Are you okay? I said, "No, I'm okay. And my phone went dead." And that's when I looked up and the second plane dove in Tower 2. That was really when, between looking at the steel beams that were on fire, papers were scattered all over the street. people were running and screaming and covered in smoke and debris. It was a complete war zone. My coworker Andrew was still with me, and he said, we have to get out of here. We have to get out of here." And I said, "Where do we go?" And he said, "South Street Seaport." South Street Seaport was actually one of my favorite places to hang out with friends, have dinner, drink. And so when we were walking there, I started thinking how many of my friends are in there.
Mm. May
And
I ask you what went through your mind when you saw the second plane hit the building that you were just in? That had to have been, as you said in your book and just a moment ago, kind of this out of body experience where you're seeing it happening, but it doesn't feel real.
it doesn't feel real. And this is something that just came to me even after all these years, that the airplane engine, the roar of it sounded exactly the same as it did when I was in my office,
Mm.
because it was so close. It was, when you see footage of the planes as they came in, you see shadows. You see shadow of the plane. I actually did see the shadow as it came in. It gave me a sense of, okay, I actually remember in my mind saying, I'm part of a military family. And even then, even after all the stories they told me, this is not something that I, as a civilian, or anybody else who is not in the military, have the ability to cope with. We walked to South Street Seaport, and nobody had cell phone service, so we were all kind of stranded there. But there were payphones at South Street Seaport, and there were lines. Hundreds of people were online to call their loved ones. And I remember, dating myself here, having a Palm Pilot.
I had one too. It's okay.
So I sent a message to my ex-boyfriend, and I said, "Tell my brother, tell Eric that I'm okay, tell my mom I'm okay." And he did. Well, actually, he tried to get in touch with my brother, but he didn't get in touch with him. But then Andrew, he's like, I waited so long, I can't get in touch with anybody. I'm waiting online for an hour. And I said, "You know what? Send a message to your sister. I have my Palm Pilot." He was like, "Oh, thank you." And, everybody that he was able to get in touch with, he did. I saw people completely in shock. There's one gentleman that was full suit, looked great, looked like $1 million. And he was sitting against a wall, looking almost destitute, saying, "This is the end. This is the end." And I was like, "No, it's not. No, it's
can
not. It's
see
not."
I can see why people would feel like it because that has never happened. We didn't know how to cope with anything like that at that point in time.
No.
But what you just said, if you would say it again, your reaction.
It's not the end. It's not the end.
Why did you say that then?
In my gut, with everything that, I guess, everything that I had been through over the course of my life, different types of abuse, there was that fiery innate feeling that I had in my blood, in every fiber of my being, that it's not the end. I'm going to get through this. I'm going to get home. I'm going to live my life. It wasn't like I was saying it's not, as a strong person. I was literally just trying to convince myself that I'm not going to die today. I'm not going to die today.
But that's part of why your story resonated with me so much. Even from that, all of this chaos and tragedy is happening around you. And instead of crumbling, you decide this is not the end. And you're thinking, I'm going to get through this. That's the heart of an overcomer. And you had already, as you mentioned, and we won't get into that today, in your earlier years, you had faced some zigzags, you had faced some struggles that you had come through, and it had developed that, as you said, that fiery attitude, but that resilience, that comeback spirit. I loved reading that part in your story. It was such a contrast between what you felt and what that man felt.
That I love that, because it was a direct contrast, but I wasn't going to tell him what I was feeling, like this wasn't the end, because that was where he was. And
Absolutely.
I believe that you let people be as they are and grow as they can when they can. We are not responsible for that. And even then, even in my shock, I just knew that I wasn't going to make this guy's life any worse by telling him something optimistic. It was a dark day. A sunny day turned into a dark day. And then all of a sudden we heard crumbles, like a hard, as if someone was doing demolition. And then someone said, "Oh my God, the tower, it's collapsing." And we saw people run towards the water. And a part of me felt the same way because of how many floors this was and because of the magnitude of the space that it took up. If it were to collapse, not on itself, but collapse onto the sidewalk, the entire lower Manhattan would be covered. When it collapsed on itself, though, the amount of debris and soot and, unfortunately, body parts, everything completely like covered. And a lot of, you see the footage, but then I started to feel dust on me. I saw like a little blood on me, and I know it wasn't mine.
Mm.
My face was just, I think I remember looking in the mirror when I got home that day and just looking at somebody completely different. But we realized that the tower collapsed on itself, so we decided to walk. Andrew and I walked up the FDR Drive. We just had to take a break. And what I found that day to be one of the most promising things was seeing a group of people with cups of water. They knew that we were making that trip, and they knew as we walked, it became hotter and hotter that day. And we needed some kind of compassion, humanity.
Yes.
We got that. We got that.
If I could go back for just a second, I wrote this out because I wanted to make sure and mention it. You described the Tower 2 crumbling, and the way that you described it was, it created this image in my head. The words that you used were just gripping, I mean, bone chilling. So I'd like to read that just quickly, and then we can talk about from where you just left off. But you said Tower 2 swayed like a huge 110-story Lego tower, a child's toy. It was as though an angry dragon had risen from the earth. The monster opened its mouth, and fire and debris shot out. Then a thick gray cloud mushroomed up and swallowed the structure. Within moments, it was gone. That's just hard to read for me because it's so descriptive. I mean, I can visualize that. Has that image haunted you over the years?
It haunted me over the last, I would say, 8 years from the time it happened, because I choose not to. When someone says, "Oh, have you seen this last clip about the World Trade Center, how it was constructed?" The fact is, I know how it was constructed. I know how it collapsed. The way it collapsed, and it was almost like a mushroom. And it was like it seemed like seconds, and then it was gone. The first 8 years until I stopped kind of torturing myself.
Yeah, I just put myself in those shoes thinking if I had just been in that building and then saw that happen, that would have been very hard. But I do understand what you mean. At some point, you have to just let it go and you have to say, okay, that was then, this is now, things are better. So I applaud that. But when I read that, I was like, wow. Seeing the pictures and then reading that, I felt like I was there, experiencing your shock and your pain and your concern, all of those things. I know that this is not a story where you're trying to be a beautiful writer, but that description was beautiful. It just really took me to that place. And it was almost as if I was standing there looking at it. Those of us that weren't in New York, didn't experience it, we see the videos, but hearing it in that way really made it so incredibly impactful for me.
Thank you. Thank you for taking the time first to read the book, but also pinpointing that one excerpt. Because to be honest, when the book was first printed, the co author and I read the book. And in reading that, I remember closing the book for a second and saying, I can't believe that happened to her.
Wow.
So I actually had a way of kind of losing the ego for a second and saying, oh, wow, this is great what I wrote. And I was like, no, she went through hell. And so
Yes.
I became she for a second.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And,
So,
and I did. I read your book. I've underlined, I've annotated. I'm a teacher. That's what I do. I do that with students that I tutor currently is I teach them how to annotate, pull out the impactful passages. There are several others that I want to mention as we continue. You walked along the FDR highway and then you saw Tower One crumble as
right.
well. So you saw both of them.
Yes, actually walking, we were not even close because I was limping. I had these high-heeled shoes. Andrew had knee surgery, so we're both already not doing well. So it took us a while to get up to FDR, but then we just heard boom, 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 boom. And then there were hundreds of us walking up the FDR, and a couple of us just looked behind us. And I think because we're all so shocked by everything, we're just saying, okay, all right, we just have to keep going. We have to keep going. And I remember in the book saying we're almost like a marching band.
I have that. I actually do.
Yeah.
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 And you were saying that you were sunburned and lightheaded, your feet were blistered beyond recognition, your hunger grew. And then we get to the part that I absolutely loved. Andrew asked if he could borrow a few dollars to get on the ferry, and you gave him what ended up being your last $2. And back then, we didn't have debit cards and such that we could just have money to use whenever or Venmo somebody.
Venmo, exactly.
You
Oh
couldn't
yeah, I'll send you a couple of dollars.
Venmo the
Sure.
cab driver, but
Nope.
you needed a
Nope.
cab to get home. I don't want to steal your joy because that part of the book made me smile. I felt God showed up in the form of a New York taxi.
God brought that cab driver into my life exactly when I needed him. It's miraculous because Andrew is still here and he can attest to what exactly happened that day. We wound up on 35th and 3rd. He knew he can get the ferry to Jersey and he hugged me and I said, okay, I figure I'd get a cab home. And we were watching all of these people jump on regular cars, asking for a ride, please give us a ride. And then there's one cab is just waiting there right in front of us. And he said, there's a cab, get it. And I was like, all right. And I gave him another hug and I walked into the cab and I could hardly walk. I remember getting into the cab and saying, okay, well, I have no money. Before I could pay him with a debit card, I have no money at all. Just remember his demeanor was so annoying. It was, I just remember saying, you do know what's happening. Why are you so happy? And he was like, oh, you're my first ride today. I'm like, what? How? And I was like, you know what? Just give me to Astoria, get me to my mother's house. Like I'll give you money when I get there. And I just remember why this happened. I have no idea either. That the city shut down, all bridges were shut down, but we were able to get through. We were the only cab going over the 59th Street Bridge. And I remember I had 13 messages on my phone. All of a sudden my phone went on and that's when I started crying. That was really when I knew that this was real and I was alive.
That's just unreal. I can't even imagine that moment of coming to that place where it all sinks in, I guess.
Yeah, it sunk in so quickly. And I remember the cab driver saying, it's okay. It's okay. You'll be home soon. You'll be home soon. And I wasn't even going to my apartment. I was going to my mom's house. But when he was encouraging me to trust in our Father, believe in our Father, he will take care of you. That was when I saw the tag date was September 11, 2001. So in my mind, I'm like, okay, it is his first day. Okay, maybe he is happy that I'm his first ride for the day. And it didn't hit me until a year after. It didn't hit me the power of what an angel can do in your life.
I've only been to New York twice. The first time we took a cab, it was dirty. It was the traditional what you see in the movies and on TV. And I'm telling my boys, don't touch anything in the cab kind of thing. But tell me about what this cab looked like.
So usually in a traditional taxi cab, there's a wall of plexiglass between the driver and the passenger. To the right is their tag license from the TLC, the Taxi Limo Commission. So it has their name, their ID number, the date that they were licensed, and the seats are leather. They smell like BO. Um, they're and the wall and the windows are usually crusty with whatever is in the air in New York. So you're inclined not to want to touch anything. Even if you're from here, you're like, ew, just get me to from point A to point B. But this cab, I could see him clearly. I could see the pattern in his pinstripe white shirt. I could smell his cologne, but it was like I don't remember he seemed like an African man. I just remember his face, his bright smile, his he had I think he had like a simple gold bracelet on when he was driving. I could see it. He just looked really classy.
Yes.
No, I'm not saying that cab drivers aren't classy. He just looked like he didn't really fit. He wasn't a fit to be a cab driver. But then the seats were immaculate. There was no scratches. The windows were just, I could see everything outside, which was actually more painful for me. I remember saying to myself, I just wish I could not see anything.
The whole thing about the cab driver struck me. In my mind, it was such a God moment.
Absolutely.
I wonder if that you could even find that guy.
I know.
I don't think you can.
I don't, but I believe that angels come in different forms.
Yes.
So he or she might have returned at some point where in my darkest moments when I was going through some kind of PTSD moment and I get a call or I see a message on social media that reminds me that we're all gifts.
Well, I loved, and this is one of the things that I wrote down. The cab driver said to you, everything will be fine. You are in the glory of God. You need to know your life has purpose. Do not give up, whatever happens. That was the thing that you needed to hear in that moment.
Absolutely.
It was just beautiful, just beautiful. And just out of curiosity, how long of a distance was it from your building to where you met the cab? Do you know how many miles that was?
So going all the way from, because remember, we were at the very tip of Manhattan. We wound up on 35th and 3rd. So going north 35 blocks.
Wow.
But because we had to do different turns through different avenues, when we went to the FDR Drive, we couldn't go anymore. We went through a park. And so we had to go through different ways but I couldn't believe we actually got that far with how his knee was doing and how my feet were done. But we did it. We made it.
That was incredible. So you ended up spending the night at your brother Eric's apartment. And then the next morning, you kind of woke up in a daze. How do you go to day two after that? I was curious what your thoughts were when you first woke up that morning.
I thought that I lived a nightmare
Mm.
because my brother was living with my mom at the time. And that night I stayed at my mom's house. So I just thought when I woke up that I must have like crashed in my brother's bed because he was out partying, doing something. And so I just woke up in my brother's bed and I was like, oh, God, that was such a bad nightmare. My brother was sitting at the foot of the bed. He never called me sis. He always called me bro. So he's like, I know. He's like, bro, are you okay? And I said, I don't know. And he said, someone called. And I said, who? The Port Authority wants to know you're accounted for. And I'm like, accounted for? I didn't understand what that meant. And then that's when I took the number from him, got on the phone, and they asked me what my name was. They confirmed it, and they said, You're confirmed. God bless you. And I had no idea that just a few days after, one of my really good friends, she couldn't get in touch with me. She called the Port Authority to look up my name. And if I never called that day, it would have taken a lot longer. So when she heard that I was okay, she cried. And I remember just saying, even through my shock, I'm just glad I did call to account for myself because there were people looking for me.
Right. They wanted to know whether or not you were okay. Tell me about when you woke up that next morning, you had coughed up blood. And of course, that probably confirmed that something serious had happened and it wasn't an actual nightmare. So you went to the doctor's office. What did they say? How did they treat you? What did they discover?
Well, first, when I mentioned that I was coughing up blood, they were saying, have you been drinking anything that is out of the ordinary? Um, do you drink more than 4 glasses of wine a day? Like they were thinking of something gastric. And then when I said I was in the World Trade Center, the doctor's face turned white. He stepped back and he said, okay. And he called in the nurse right away. And they did an x-ray of my chest and they found that there was something going on in my chest that was making me cough up blood. Back then, I didn't know why. And I think this is something that sometimes does happen, but they said just you have to just let it come out of you. There's no way we can actually go in there and clear out if we don't exactly know what's in there. This is foreign debris that's in your system. So I coughed up blood, but it became less and less over the course of like 3 or 4 days.
But in the book, you had said that they discovered dust particles consisting of glass and soot in your lungs, which that would have been scary.
I think from the first collapse, because we were still in the South Street Seaport, we were only 4 or 5 blocks away. So when it did collapse, like I felt like we started to move out once the tower collapsed, and we didn't even know what the damage was going to be. Even though we didn't see a lot of the smoke, we just felt it, we smelled it, we wore it, we wore it. Yeah. And then but they checked on me and they said, if you're not coughing up blood, any kind of mucus. And I said no. Unfortunately, throughout the years, I started having some breathing problems from that. And so I'm always mindful that it was a cause and effect.
Sure. And that was one of the questions that I had. Have you experienced any health challenges as a result of 9/11?
Well, well, in 2017, I was going to school in Texas actually, and I started having these. And I would work out 5 days a week, do like hit workouts. And one day I was doing regular push-ups or like bicycle ab workout or whatever, and I couldn't breathe. It felt like my lungs constricted. I had no way of breathing. So I called my doctor in New York and they got me in touch with the 9/11 health program. I got set up. I went to New York and they said, you have chronic bronchitis, you have onset of COPD, pulmonary disease,
Wow.
and this had nothing to do with anything that I had been doing prior. And so I have to really be very mindful. They actually told me, keep working out, strengthen your lungs, because the moment that you stop, you're giving up power, pretty much.
Well, I'm sorry to hear that.
Thank you.
I am. I kind of assumed that there might be something that you struggled with health wise because I've seen other reports, of course. Tell me about those next few weeks after 9/11. You went to the doctor. What was it like emotionally, mentally? How did you cope with learning all the things that, of course, came out during those first few months?
Well, it was that in I was in New York for the first 2 weeks after 9/11. And in that time, I feel like my mind had to be in some sort of numbness because the day that I arrived at my mother's house, I started getting calls from my friends' parents. And so I don't know how they got my mother's number, but they were calling me, parents, saying, have you seen her? Have you seen him? So I was already starting to feel a little anxious because I was like, I'm still going through it. This is still happening. The next day and throughout the next week, my friends and I would get on calls and we would say, they found Brendan's finger. So these things were like over the course of 2 weeks, it was like it was just happening every day,
Just like the
continuing.
punch just kept coming.
We
Wow.
found we found so and so's watch. They found so and so's watch. It's surreal. It's surreal.
I can't even imagine. And I'm sure that you talked about it with your friends and possibly with your family, but unless you were there, I can't get into truly understanding it because I wasn't there. Was it any comfort to be able to talk to people who were there?
That is such a wonderful question. Actually, no, it doesn't. It never gave me comfort to talk with people who I worked with or friends.
Interesting.
But coincidentally enough, my best friend, Jen, was also in the building, but she was on the 94th floor. She, to this day, does not talk about it.
Oh, wow. Is that hard for you that you can't talk with her?
No, no, because I have the pleasure of speaking with people like yourself.
Yeah.
I actually prefer to speak with people who are removed from that from that location that day because I don't have to get emotional. I don't have to. I can be vulnerable and that's fine, but if I were to talk to somebody who was there, it would only I feel like it would only hold me back from my progress because a lot of my friends, they all like either they don't talk about it or they're still in therapy from it.
That is a very different perspective, but I appreciate that so much. I would have never thought in that way, but what you're saying makes perfect sense. Then the level of emotionality would be just so intense that it would probably crush you. Did you have any other struggles over the next few years besides your health? I know that you've moved back to New York from Florida. When you're down in that area, does that bring back memories or do you avoid that area? Tell me about that.
I already knew from 9/11. I already knew that there were certain things up until this day that were triggers.
Hmm.
So one of the most powerful triggers for me is a smell of burning rubber. And where I lived in Florida, in Fort Lauderdale, anytime we drive up 95, we'd see the planes coming into the airport. And there's not one time since 9/11 when I see an airplane that I my heart doesn't drop.
Oh,
Um, but on the fifth year of 9/11, I had a conversation with Andrew and he asked me what I remember. For some reason, like I'm not going to retract what I said before about preferring to speak with, but with him, it was a different story because we spent the entire day together.
sure.
I felt like he and I were actually one entity. We were one organism. And so when he said, this is something that I don't talk to you about because I don't think you actually remember this. And I said, okay, just tell me. And he said, the reason why I told you we have to get out of here is because you were watching people jump and
Oh,
you couldn't get your eyes off of them. And I said, I don't remember. To this day, I do not remember doing that. It was a part of my consciousness that my mind decided to say, you know what, this is too much. This is
yes.
too much. So even when he told me, it's not like I didn't care, but I myself was removed from it because I don't remember it. So I was like, okay, all right. It's not as stressful as anything else that I remember. If that makes sense.
I'm glad that you don't remember that. That would be awful. Tell me about how surviving 9/11 has impacted your faith.
After 9/11, the media put in pretty much a warning saying, okay, we're all going to hate Muslims. They all want to kill us. They all want to put us into danger all the time. I took that kind of message and I said, you know what? Okay, so let me just delve into other faiths. So I started to research Islam, Buddhism, Hinduism, Catholicism, Lutheran, all of them. And just to find a common denominator, that's how I came up with the fact that I couldn't hate anyone, any society, any denomination. I love humanity. When you love humanity, there's no room for hate because it's all love. So it strengthened it strengthened my faith in God in the sense that the angel, I call him the angel, in that cab said the glory. To me, glory means universal. It means something that is within us and outside of us. So I thought, this my faith is actually strengthened, and God is my father, completely my father. And since then, that's how I felt about it.
That's fantastic. Now, I know from your book, you talked about how being in 9/11 and surviving actually helped you discover your purpose. So tell me about that, please.
When I was going through a very dark moment and I became a yoga teacher, one of my gurus in India, I contacted him and I said, Guruji, I said, I'm struggling. I don't know what to do. I'm always in the dark. I can't find the light. And he said, whenever you feel this way, find someone to serve. You're a yoga teacher. Go out and serve others, serve others. He made me realize that serving others was actually my purpose. So I think a lot of people, when they think about purpose, my purpose is to have a certain type of job in a certain type of industry. I'm purpose to do this. I think to serve others is a universal purpose.
It
To
most
give
certainly
to
is.
give yourself to someone else is the biggest and most rewarding gift you can, because it removes the darkness from your own being, because you're giving yourself to somebody else.
That's beautiful. When you speak to businesses and at schools, what do you share with them to motivate them to achieve their dreams and to fulfill their purpose?
Well, one of the things I strive to convey is take time to rest, take time to meditate on what serves you the most. When you look at your life, don't ever think that you can step into the water of a river twice in the same water, because it's forever flowing, it's forever changing. And if you do not flow with that change and be stagnant, you have a world in front of you that's moving. Looking in the past does not bring you to that place anymore. You're stuck. And that's the worst thing to feel, when you know that there's something better, that you could be better, that you could do better. That's really the message that I talk to when I talk to high school students, college students, business professionals.
I love that. That is right in line with what I talk to my students about. I don't use necessarily the river example. I might have to steal that from you. That
Sure.
was beautiful. Uh, that is so important, not to miss what is happening in our lives now, and we won't get to have it back again. As you know, the never forget theme goes along with 9/11, and I'm sure we'll be seeing it all throughout September. Why is it important for us to never forget 9/11?
I was actually talking to some people about this. Why do we say never forget? Because there was a time where I was thinking, I need to move forward. I need to move forward. Why do I need to keep remembering this? But I think when it comes to loved ones and friends like myself, of those who died, we never forget them.
Yes.
I think it's more so the people, not as much watching the towers collapse, or how many people died that day, or how many people died at the Pentagon. We're talking about people. I'm never going to forget the people who made such a difference in our lives.
Remembering the events and the horror and the tragedy is not going to make us better or help us to move forward. It's remembering the people, the lives that were lost, and remembering the beauty that they brought to this world.
Absolutely.
And I love how you said that. Since we are at the 20th anniversary, is there any special meaning for you this year?
Maybe there should be, but this is not a milestone. This is not something wonderful like your 50th podcast. This is not, that's something to celebrate. This is a day of remembrance. And I think 20 years, I actually look at it as from a more optimistic standpoint where I'm saying, okay, I'm writing my next book. I became a yoga teacher. I became a professional speaker. All of these things happened from 9/11 to now. And I think of it as a timeline of mindfulness, achievement, accomplishment, and giving to others.
Since 9/11, you've pursued being a business owner. You wrote your first book. You've become a yoga teacher, which you did this morning at 5:45. Pretty impressive, I must say. I was still quite asleep. Um, what are you pursuing now and in the future?
So I have 20,000 words already written for the next book. And the editor is anxiously awaiting that, as well as the book designer, the layout person. I have a book publishing coach who's like, come on, like you got this already. And I'm like, yeah. And this is really exciting because this is a book that I'm writing on my own. The
Yes.
last book was written with somebody else. And so I'm feeling that this is going to be the thing that brings balance to my life because I currently am in a profession, in a legal profession, and I feel that there has to be a balance between business and our biggest passion, because some of us have a passion for that business, of course, but then it's almost like the yin yang, that feeling of balance. And I think writing this book will bring me much joy to be able to share the other experiences that happened since 9/11.
Can you possibly give us a synopsis of it?
Sure. Empowerment. One of the biggest hashtags out there is empowering women.
Mm-hmm.
And in one speech that I made, I said, on stage, I actually said, I am not on stage to empower anybody. Maybe my words will bring a spark to your being and say, wait, I'm empowered by being here. I'm empowered by what I did today. And someone told me after that speech, she said, I felt empowered because I got out of bed today. And I said, you got out of bed. You empowered yourself. So this book is actually sharing the experiences that I had that helps people become inspired about their own lives, celebrating their own accomplishments, and maybe having a little inspiration from the words that I share in the book.
That sounds fantastic. So I'm going to continue to encourage you. I'll be sending you texts and saying, come on, girl, you got this.
I love that. I would totally welcome that.
Because I know I've been working on a book for a while and I've had to put it aside a couple of times for various reasons. And I agree with you. It's important to share those messages that are on our hearts.
Exactly.
We're going to have to start wrapping up. It has been amazing, but I have two questions left for you. Tell me some lessons that you have learned as a result of the zigzags that you have faced in your life.
One was that when I find myself in a place of darkness, that I am not living every day of my life, that I'm not believing that that every day that I'm living, that I could die at any moment, but at least I know that I can be here making a difference. That was the biggest lesson that I've learned since that day.
Very interesting because we don't often take our daily lives and just focus on that. But that is really all we have because we're not guaranteed tomorrow.
That's right.
So that is, and especially in light of what you've gone through, you see how quickly it can be gone.
Exactly.
What would be the one takeaway that you would want the listeners to have from everything you've said today?
That in our lifetime, some of us will actually experience our own form of 9/11, whether that be loss of job, loss of a loved one, in a state of darkness. let yourself hurt, let yourself be in that place, because eventually that knowingness that you got through that will only make your accomplishments even sweeter.
It's all about the overcoming. You've got to accept what has happened to you and deal with that. But then, as we talked about several times throughout the interview today, you can't stay there. You've got to move on, and you've got to start taking one day at a time and appreciating and valuing. So all the things that you've been talking about are what is so powerful about your story, in that you've gone through what myself and many, many others across the nation would say is horrifically tragic, and you've lost friends, but yet it clearly has not stopped you from living fully. I am so impressed and inspired by that.
Thank you.
It has been such an honor and a joy to spend time with you today.
It's been such an honor and pleasure for me as well, Melanie.
Thank you so much, Michelle.
Thank you.
What an honor to be able to hear from a 9/11 survivor. I'm so grateful to Michelle for her vulnerability in sharing her story. On this 20th anniversary of 9/11, I wonder if we could remember those who lost their lives and those who survived, like Michelle. But most of all, I wonder if we could remember the unity all of us felt for months and even years after that horrific day. Many events over the last 2 years have broken my heart because they've moved us away from unity. They're dividing our nation, and it's crushing our spirits. May we honor all those who were impacted by 9/11 by seeking unity instead of hate and loving our fellow man. Would you join me in that? Thank you for listening to this special episode. Please share it with your friends, your family, and on your social media. And until next time, keep moving forward.